The MCU has been going on for 13 years now. That means we've had many, many heroes introduced. So today I'm going to be counting down my top 10 best or favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe heroes. Hey everyone, welcome back to Movie Morning, where we discuss all things movies, reviews, rankings, news updates, trailer episodes, and all of that fun stuff. And today I am going to be discussing the MCU once again, but discussing pretty much my favorite 10 MCU heroes with quite a few honorable mentions. I actually considered doing like an entire ranking, but there's just too many characters. And I also have to mention that my perception of what a hero in the MCU is might be different from yours. So if a character who is a hero but you might think is a villain, I won't have, he will still be on this list. Or if it's a character that I think is a villain, you think is a hero, it might be on your list, but it won't be on mine. And I know there's a few picks in here, specifically in the top 10, that even you guys might say is a villain and stuff like that. But, there's a lot of characters, and I narrowed it down to 10 of my favorites. But I also do have, again, quite a few honorable mentions. And I would also like to give a spoiler warning for the entirety of the MCU from this point onwards. With that said, going through the honorable mentions list, I've got Black Panther, Falcon, a.k.a. Sam Wilson, or now Captain America, the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff, Gamora, Rocket, as well as OG Groot, Ant-Man. I've also got Yelena Belova. Now we've got a few characters from Phase 4, like Mobius, Sylvie, who I consider a hero, but you might not. But in the first season, she's kind of treated as a protagonist. And lastly, Clint Barton, a.k.a. Hawkeye. With that said, now again, full spoiler warning, let's get into the top 10. Kicking off my top 10 is Yondu. Now, some people might not have him as high as I do, but obviously in the first Guardians, he's kind of just a simpler little scene stealer, with his arrow and whistling and all that, coming in a few scenes. He acts as a nice opposing figure to the Guardians at points. He even helps them by the finale. He was a massive scene stealer and great character in the first movie, but he just didn't get much to work with in terms of development. And in Guardians 2, he got a massive boost. He had a very complex relationship with Peter, and it leads to such a heartbreaking and emotional scene in the climax. And the reason that you feel so much in that scene is because of James Gunn's writing of this character, and Michael Rooker's portrayal of him, and how he's treated in the movie. And throughout the movie, he's paired up with Rocket, and we get to see, their dynamic and how similar they actually are. And he's just given so much to do by the end. And he's actually one of the characters in the MCU who've had a full journey, and that's why, to me, he cracks the top 10, even though he doesn't get as much to work with as some other characters. Number 9, Doctor Strange. Now, I do have to say that I think that I feel like for this character, I've loved him more as he's shown up more. Like, I loved him in Infinity War a lot more than in his solo movie. I think it's slightly because in his solo movie, he's treated as a bit more of a sassy as well as arrogant doctor, when in Infinity War, he had some really charismatic interactions and fun, interactions with the characters, and he's full potential of the Sorcerer Supreme, and Doctor Strange, the character, is reached. Obviously, Benedict Cumberbatch is perfect in this role and absolutely elevates the material, even in the first movie, and the actor is just fun to watch on screen, that he had to crack the top 10. By the time you get into Infinity War, I feel like they make you love this character more and more, and this is a character who I can see going higher and higher on this list. Number 8, Loki. Now, I'm referring to the TV show variant of Loki and not the Loki we've been dealing with in the MCU. And the reason I didn't include that one, because, again, that definitely falls in the lines of villain a bit more, because he's a villain in the first Avengers movie. So I thought it would be a lot simpler to just include the Loki we have in this show. And the thing is, this Loki, throughout the entire, 6 episodes, does grow, and obviously in the upcoming seasons of Loki, again, I already mentioned a spoiler warning, he will continue to grow. And the series really went into what makes Loki tick, and it's so intimate, so beautifully directed and written, and that makes the character a lot easier to connect with and less distant, because he's a bit more of a villain in the first couple movies he appears in. He goes from just, being a bit more simpler to by the time we get to the end of the season, he's the character who's trying to make the right and morally right decision. He actually goes to care for people, and, especially in terms of the choice he makes at the finale, which I'm sure you've watched, you know what I'm talking about. And especially his relationship with characters in the entire show, whether it's with Mobius or his romantic little relationship with Sylvie. is so great. And obviously, I have to mention Tom Hiddleston because he's one of the most likable actors, and he's so great in this role, and that's why Loki comes in at number 8. Number 7 is Bruce Banner, a.k.a. the Hulk. Now, he is one of those characters that really keeps changing, and the MCU really keeps transitioning him into different phases throughout the entire MCU. They keep doing new things with him, like transforming him into different variations. That's what really shows growth. In the first couple movies, he's Bruce Banner. Then we've just got this rage-out Hulk who doesn't really talk and just wants to smash. And then as we go along, he becomes a bit smarter. And by the time we get to Ragnarok, he's become smart. He can have conversations with people. And by the time you get to Infinity War, he doesn't even want to come out. And although some people were disappointed by that, I like that they showed a bit restraint with him to kind of further his character. And by the time we come to Endgame, they take that next step where they transform the Hulk and Bruce Banner into one character. So Mark Ruffalo can kind of just go off with the character. And I think that was the best direction to go. Now, I would have preferred him to have a bit of a Hulk out moment in Endgame. I don't know if that's a criticism I can really have because there's so much going on, but I would have liked to see it. But to be honest with you, I've dug pretty much all the variations of the character we've had. Now, I would have actually liked to see a bit more of his variation in Ragnarok because I actually really enjoyed his interactions with Thor. But I like that they keep doing new things with this character and it keeps him fresh and keeps him from being boring. Number 6, Peter Quill, a.k.a. Star-Lord. Now, I know this is a character who a lot of people are going to have a lot lower than me, mainly because of what he does in Infinity War, kind of what a lot of people say it's his fault for, the universe, half the universe getting wiped away. But that's really the main reason I love his character, because he's so human at his core. This is a guy who's in space, who talks like people on Earth, like us. That just makes him so relatable and likable. And obviously, Chris Pratt is perfect as his character. I don't know who else they would have gotten that would have done as good of a job as him in here. But he has human emotions while also being this epic leader in space who leads this entire team of Guardians. In Guardians 2, they obviously go into his heritage, and we deal with ego. And he's forced to make a lot of tough choices, a lot of human choices, despite being very intergalactical feeling stuff. And I really appreciate they go to that length with this character. And that's why he comes in this high at number 6. And I just love watching him on screen. Kicking off my top 5 is Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. And obviously, she finally recently got her solo movie. And I'd love to learn more about her. And I love that they finally went into a bit of how her childhood was. And I love that scene they had in their past. And I just liked that we got to go a bit deeper with her character and learn more about how you heard the relationship she had before she became an Avenger. But even before that, this is a character that they very slowly given a bit more to in every movie she's appeared, slowly developed. And by the time we get to Endgame, she actually has a really great emotional arc that I think really makes her one of the best characters of the movie. And it's obviously Scarlett Johansson's amazing actor, and she's great in this role. Again, she's gone through a few transitions. Like when she showed up, she was kind of just, wasn't really given much of a character, but now she's by far one of the, she's a character that I feel like the audience is connected with the most. Obviously, she did die in Avengers Endgame, so she has had that journey, and I think that because she's appeared in so many different things, they've slowly developed her. Now with the movie kind of tying the bow on her character, I think that she's pretty much always going to be in the higher rankings of the MCU, and this is pretty much, I guess, going to be her spot now because I don't really see her coming back, and Black Widow is the first at my top 5. Number 4 is Thor. Now, I do have to admit that this might be a bit more of a personal preference because this is by far one of the most inconsistent characters in the entire MCU. But I feel like Chris Hemsworth has always given his all. He's always so likable and hilarious in all the versions of this character that he elevates pretty much every version of the character we've had. But even then, the best versions of this character we've had, like in the later parts of the MCU, could have even cracked the top 2, really. He is so good at points. I feel like his arc from Ragnarok to Endgame, now I get it. Like, Endgame, they treat him in a more comedic area in terms of actually really going deep with how his character could have been affected. But I think for that movie, it does fit in that, just the way that, how he's dealing with it. And I think within the universe, it was probably the best way to do it. Now, I love his arc through those movies. I loved him in Ragnarok, where they gave him a bit more of a comedic edge. Then in Infinity War, it continued that, but he was a bit in more of a dire and desperate situation. I just love what they did with him. He might have been the standout of Infinity War. And recently in the MCU, he might be a bit higher, but obviously some of his earlier appearances he wasn't as flamboyant or entertaining. But I still think Chris Hemsworth does a good job. But it's because of his later appearances that's what really pushed him up to number 4. And I did struggle a lot between putting Black Widow above Thor. But since I know Thor is coming back, and because Taika Waititi is coming back, I really just think that I don't know when I'll update this, but I feel like he'll just keep going up and up because of his coming appearances. Getting into my top 3 now, we have Spider-Man, obviously Peter Parker, played by Tom Holland. And I just love seeing the MCU from the perspective of a teenager, and that doesn't even include the character of Spider-Man. He's Spider-Man, my favorite superhero of all time, tied with Batman, my favorite in the entire Marvel universe. If I'm looking at all iterations combined, and I love this character. I love Tom Holland in this role, and he's just been given so many standout moments. Like obviously, at first he's a bit more of like a team player. He's in Civil War, and in Spider-Man: Homecoming, he's still kind of in Tony Stark's shadow, but like as we've gone on with the movies, he's been able to stand on his own more and more. And I'm a massive Spider-Man fan, so I know that I'm probably a bit biased, but I love to see him standing on his own. Now, with No Way Home and where it looks like they're taking his character, it looks like Doctor Strange is going to kind of replace Tony Stark, which is a little concerning. But as of right now, I love what they've done with him. I love seeing him in general, and just whenever he shows up, it just makes anything more entertaining and enjoyable. He's had some really emotional moments. And this character, despite his short time in this universe, has been given so much already. And you can tell that they knew there was a lot of potential in this character. My runner-up is Iron Man. Now, this is by far the character that I think has been given the most clear arc throughout the movies. He started off as a flawed, arrogant human being to saving the universe. And if you watch the first Iron Man, there are so many lines and pieces of dialogue that comes back, and scenes in general that come back into play by the end of the movie. Especially, not by the end of the movie, by the end of Endgame, lines that are referencing the saving the universe, or how he's going to sacrifice, how he was not ever going to be the guy to sacrifice himself, even in the first Avengers movie, to where it goes. Obviously, Robert Downey Jr. is so likable in this role, and even the way that his characters close off with the "I am Iron Man" line, and giving up everything he's gained after the snap. The way they take him in Endgame is so heartbreaking, but it's also got this really fulfilling aspect to it because of where his character started and where he ended. Now, a lot of people are going to have Tony Stark at number 1, but I think for me personally, my number 1 is just the character that I've latched onto with this universe the most. So it's a bit more of a personal one and a bit less objective, but coming in at number 1 for me is Steve Rogers, or Captain America. This is my personal favorite character in the MCU. I love that when this character gets introduced, we have this little character study in the first Avenger. I love that he's, kind of at his heart is just the perfect heart, from a human. He's just the perfect, guy to kind of, just the way he feels about everyone. He's willing to help everyone, and he's kind of dropped in a morally gray world. When he was alive, it was a black and white World War II world, and it created a lot of interesting scenarios. When he first came into the MCU, it showed some of his flaws a bit more, and I love how they explored that, especially how the Russo brothers did it. And again, this is a character who's already received his conclusion, so obviously that does take him up a bit because we've seen him throughout his entire, and he was given such a satisfying conclusion. Getting that dance, again, the callbacks, the tiebacks from the earlier points in the MCU. And to me, Steve Rogers does have by far the most iconic moments and best, most crowd-pleasing moments in the entire universe. Just throughout the entire 13 years the MCU has been around. Mainly the Avengers Assemble moment and lifting Mjolnir in Avengers Endgame. And it's so satisfying for massive fans of this character, such as myself. And that's why, to me, Steve Rogers, or Captain America, is at number 1, and I don't see any character ever in this universe topping pretty much the top 2 in here. So with that said, that does come to the end of this top 10. Thank you all, guys, always so much for listening. As always, catch you all next time. Bye-bye.